My name is Linda Carmichael, 64, retired event coordinator from New Jersey. I've spent 3 decades planning other people's perfect days, floral arches, champagne fountains, choreographed dances. I knew every rhythm of joy, every angle of lighting that made people look like they had their lives together. But today, I was just another unpaid extra in someone else's show. When I arrived wearing the mauve chiffon dress I'd steamed at 6 a.m., one of the servers stopped me at the reception entrance. "Ma'am, The bride asked if you could wait back here. "Back here," I repeated. The boy couldn't have been older than 20. His bow tie was crooked, his cheeks flushed. "Yes, ma'am." She said there was a visual clash with the color palette. Color palette. I almost laughed. 32 weddings in my career, and that was a first. I'd heard brides cry over cake tears over chairs not gold enough, but never a mother banned for clashing with the decor. I stepped aside, letting another waiter rush past with a platter of shrimp cocktails, the sauce trembling in crystal cups. Through the swinging door, I could see the ballroom chandeliers, ivory linens, white roses that I had paid for. I stood there for a moment, like a prop that hadn't been placed yet. Then a man in a chef's jacket noticed me. "Oh dear, you shouldn't be standing here." "I was told to sit," I said. He frowned, wiping his hands on a towel, and pulled out a folding chair between a rolling cart and the industrial fridge. "It's cooler here," he said softly. "Less crowded." I smiled, polite, professional. The kind of smile you give when you know there's nothing left to fix. The chair creaked as I sat. My knees brushed against stacked trays. The smell of garlic and steam clung to the air. Every clang of metal pans was a reminder that somewhere just beyond the door, my son was toasting his new wife. Funny thing, I'd handled disasters more chaotic than this. A venue fire alarm. A drunk best man. Once even a runaway horse at a farm wedding. I'd always found a way to make it beautiful again. But what do you do when the disaster is your own exclusion? One of the younger waitresses nervous whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Carmichael. We were told not to let you out during photos." I nodded. "It's fine, sweetheart. I'm not exactly photogenic in fluorescent light." Inside, the band struck the first notes of a waltz. The sound seeped through the cracks in the wall, muffled but clear enough to sting. I pictured the scene, my son, Leo, tall, handsome, adjusting his cufflinks while Ruby, the bride, beamed beside him. I'd bought those cufflinks for his graduation, silver with tiny initials engraved. He'd once said, "Mom, these will last me a lifetime." Apparently so would my invisibility. The chef handed me a glass of water. "Would you like something to eat?" I looked down at the plate he placed on the prep counter, 2 cocktail shrimp and a wedge of lemon. Perfect, I thought. A sample menu for the woman who paid for the feast. Steam rose from a boiling pot. My reflection warped on its surface. Behind me, someone shouted, "Table 7 needs more bread," and a door slammed. The noise was relentless, metallic, almost comic in its cruelty. I exhaled slowly. "You planned this?" I murmured to myself. Not the wedding, I had stayed out of that. Ruby wanted everything modern minimalist. She said my taste was too sentimental, but the seating chart that had her handwriting all over it. The door flapped again, and for a brief second, I caught a glimpse of the ballroom. Leo stood in the center, smiling at Ruby's mother, a tall woman dripping pearls holding her glass high. They looked perfect, framed by fairy lights and money that wasn't theirs. Something twisted in my stomach. Not jealousy, not even pain, more like recognition. I had built that world for them, paid, planned, polished. And in the final draft, they'd edited me out. The waiter brushed past again, his tray wobbling. A cocktail glass tipped and splashed cold liquid on my sleeve. "I'm so sorry," he gasped. "It's fine," I said, automatically blotting the stain with a napkin. That's what women my age do, isn't it? Clean up spills that aren't theirs. Smile through disrespect. Pretend the burn is just hot sauce. A burst of laughter echoed from the other side. Toasts had begun. Someone tapped a glass. The microphone screeched. A man's voice, Leo's father-in-law, boomed through the speakers. To our beautiful daughter and her amazing husband, Leo cheers erupted. Then, and to our families, old and new, old and new. I looked around. The only family near me was a stack of dirty dishes. The head chef, a man built like a refrigerator, approached. "You doing okay, ma'am? Never better," I said. He studied me, eyes kind. "You're the mother, right?" "Apparently not photogenically compatible," I replied dryly. He chuckled. "That's a good one." "I do comedy now," I said. "Retirement hobby." He laughed louder than I expected, the sound warm in the cold air. "Well, ma'am, if you ever need a stage, you can borrow my kitchen." "Careful," I said. "I might just take over." For a moment, it almost felt funny. Almost. Then the door swung again. The chandelier light flashed, and there he was, Leo raising his glass toward Ruby's parents. I froze mid-laugh. My son toasting another mother. My throat tightened. The heat from the oven felt sharper, like I was standing too close to fire. He looked happy. That's what I'd always wanted. But happiness shouldn't cost someone else's dignity. I pressed my napkin to my mouth, pretending to wipe lipstick. My eyes burned. Probably just the onions, I told myself, or the irony. The applause grew louder. Ruby leaned to whisper in his ear, and he nodded, their fingers intertwined. The same hands I'd once held crossing streets, teaching him how to tie shoelaces, sign birthday cards. The chef turned off a burner. The sizzle died. Quiet fell for the first time that afternoon, except for the muffled music beyond the door. I realized my hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from restraint. Decades of it. I'd spent a lifetime making things beautiful for others, fixing chaos, smoothing over rough edges. But this was deliberate ugliness. The waiter returned again, hesitant. "Would you like me to get you something from the bar?" I looked him straight in the eye. "No, thank you. But tell the band to play something they can dance to." He blinked, confused. "Sure, ma'am." He hurried off. When the door swung this time, I didn't avert my eyes. I watched the entire room spin in synchronized laughter. They clinked glasses under the chandelier I'd chosen in the hall I'd booked at the table I'd paid for, and then I smiled. Not the polite smile. The other one, the kind that hides thunder behind calm. Through the door's narrow window, Leo lifted his glass again. "To family," he shouted. I whispered back, "To lessons." My heart steadied. The hum inside me wasn't grief anymore. It was calculation, quiet, precise, almost professional. The same feeling I'd had before fixing a disaster on site. Something had gone wrong and I was about to correct it. The door closed, sealing off the laughter. I looked around the kitchen trays, timers, utensils, chaos. The chef caught my eye again and nodded, respectful this time. Maybe he recognized that look. The look of someone about to reclaim control. I straightened my back, adjusted the mauve chiffon, and reached for my phone. The wedding planner in me wasn't dead. She was just waiting for her cue, and I had just found it. The kitchen had its own music, a constant percussion of frying pans, clanging trays, and the hiss of oil meeting water. I sat in the middle of it, my chiffon dress now smelling faintly of garlic and burnt butter. Every breath felt like breathing through steam and memory. Someone had parked a stack of used trays beside me, silver catching the fluorescent light like a cheap disco ball. My folding chair wobbled every time the dishwasher slammed the door. For a woman who had spent her life orchestrating elegance champagne towers, silk tablecloths, violins at sunset, this was poetic punishment. A young waiter brushed past, then stopped mid-stride. "Wait, are you—" He squinted at me. "Are you Linda Carmichael?" Like the Linda Carmichael. I smiled tight-lipped. "Last time I checked." His jaw dropped. "Oh my God, you taught at the Somerset Event School, right? I watched your training videos on vendor management. You're like a legend." I tilted my head. A legend sitting by the kitchen door. "That's how fast fame fades, kid," he stammered. "But why are you— how the bride I interrupted didn't want a visual clash." My crime was mauve chiffon. He looked horrified. "That's insane." I shrugged. "Insanity is the theme of most weddings. You'll see." He laughed nervously, unsure if it was safe to. I added, "Kid. I've planned better weddings even for dogs." He burst out laughing this time, a genuine belly laugh that cut through the noise of the kitchen. For a second, it almost made me laugh too. Almost. Then my hand started to tremble. Not the kind of shake from nerves, the slow internal vibration of something breaking of anger held too long under control. I pressed my palm flat on the table until it stopped. Behind us, the chef shouted for more scallops. Steam whooshed upward, curling around my hair. I caught my reflection in a metal mixing bowl, older, softer, tired. A queen in exile wearing a crown of kitchen fumes. My phone buzzed in my purse. Notifications, photos from guests tagging the wedding location. I clicked one. There they were, Leo and Ruby, standing under a floral arch I'd ordered myself, beaming. The caption read, "The most magical night ever. Magical. Sure. Every magician needs someone to disappear." The kitchen door creaked open. A man in a suit poked his head in, looking confused. Restroom down the hall first." "Right," the chef barked. The man hesitated. His gaze landed on me. "Oh, are you staff?" That word. Staff. I smiled sweetly. Retired staff. He nodded, thanked me, and walked off, oblivious. The door swung again, and for a flash, a single second, I saw the banquet hall in full glow. Golden chandeliers, rows of white-draped tables, the band tuning up under fairy lights, Ruby's laughter echoing through the room, her hand on my son's arm, her mother dabbing tears with a linen napkin, dramatic, like she was auditioning for sympathy. Then the door shut. The light disappeared. Something inside me went still. I'd spent years teaching brides how to handle crises with grace. When things go wrong, I'd tell them, "Smile, delegate, adapt." But there's no training manual for being erased. The young waiter lingered near me, pretending to organize cutlery. He kept glancing my way like he wanted to say something comforting, but couldn't find words. Finally, he blurted out, "You don't deserve this." I let out a short laugh. "Sweetheart, life's not a merit system. You think good mothers get good sons. Sometimes we just get seating by the kitchen." He looked away, embarrassed. I almost felt sorry for him. The poor kid still believed in fairness. The chef walked by carrying a tray of roasted chicken. "That's going to the main table," he said. "The royal court," I asked. He grinned. Something like that. I wanted to tell him I used to be the royal court, that I'd built those kingdoms flower by flower, schedule by schedule, but words stuck in my throat. Another burst of laughter came through the door, louder this time. Someone clinked a glass. "Speech, speech," they shouted. I could imagine it, Ruby's father, rising, confident, smug. He'd probably make a joke about how lucky Leo was to marry into such a refined family. I'd heard him once at the rehearsal dinner the man could turn a thank you into a sermon. I stared at the metal door like it might dissolve if I glared hard enough. My chest felt tight. The young waiter touched my arm gently. "Do you want to go out there, Mrs. Carmichael? I could—" "No," I said quickly. "This is their stage. Let them perform." He hesitated, then nodded. "You sure? I've never been surer. Besides, someone's got to supervise the shrimp." He smiled, reluctant but obedient, and walked away. I sat back, listening to the rhythm of their joy. Every laugh was a needle, every cheer a reminder. When you're a mother, you tell yourself you'll give anything for your child. You just never expect anything to include your place in his life. The chef flipped a timer, the beep cutting through the noise. "You hungry yet?" "No," I said. Angry, then I looked up at him. His tone wasn't mocking. It was matter of fact. "Depends," I said. "You got a recipe for that?" He grinned. "Sure. Start with betrayal, simmer in oil, serve cold." I laughed. The sound surprised even me. "You've done this before weddings, a few hundred. Happy endings, maybe 5. We shared a silent nod, a truce between two people who understood how love and catering always end the same way: someone cleans up, someone leaves early. Then another voice, high, fake sweet, filtered through the door. Ruby's. To my wonderful husband's family, she was saying, "Thank you for letting me join your world." My nails dug into my palm. Letting her. As if she hadn't already taken everything. Applause, cheers. The sound of clinking glasses again. My chest ached in a dull, steady pulse. The smell of roasting herbs mixed with something sour resentment, maybe. I looked at my hands resting on my lap. They were trembling again, faintly rhythmically, like the ticking of a timer about to go off. I thought of the years I'd spent teaching Leo to be polite, humble, grateful, the nights working double shifts so he could have braces, the way he'd cling to me when thunder scared him. I had built his entire sense of safety, and he'd traded it for someone else's applause. The chef came back, wiping his brow. "You okay, ma'am?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just adjusting to my new kingdom." He raised an eyebrow. I gestured to the chair beneath me. "Queen of the folding chair." He chuckled softly. "Then long live the queen." I picked up a napkin and fanned myself, pretending the heat bothered me more than the humiliation. But when the door opened again and the light spilled across the kitchen tiles, I couldn't help it. My eyes followed. There they were, hand in hand, dancing under gold light. The band played something slow, sentimental. Ruby's dress shimmered. Leo's smile was unrecognizable. For a moment, everything froze, the kitchen noise, the laughter, even my breath. And I understood finally that the humiliation wasn't temporary. It was permanent. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd placed me exactly where they wanted me, out of sight, out of story. The door swung shut. Darkness returned. The clatter of pans resumed. I straightened my shoulders the way I used to before stepping on stage to fix another wedding disaster. If this was the role they gave me, I'd play it differently. Queens don't beg for thrones. They build new ones. Somewhere beyond the kitchen door, the applause began again, the kind that made glasses tremble and chandeliers shake. The speeches had started. Through the thin metal, Ruby's voice rose sweet and sharp as frosting. To my wonderful husband's family, she said, "Thank you for letting me join your world." Letting her. I thought, pressing my palms against my lap, as if I hadn't bought the world she was standing in. Then came her mother, the self-anointed Duchess of the evening. "We're so grateful for our new son," she gushed, her voice amplified through the speakers. "He's charming, polite, and comes from such a hard-working background." Hard-working background. That was me, the background. The part you crop out of the photo before printing it for the thank you cards. The waitstaff paused to listen, smiling faintly. The irony wasn't lost on them. The woman paying for the whole event was sitting on a folding chair beside the dishwasher. I sipped my lukewarm water, staring at the condensation ring it left on the counter. Each droplet felt like a small punctuation mark on a sentence I hadn't written. Then the MC's voice came booming in. "And let's not forget a special thanks to our catering assistant, Linda." There was polite applause. For a second, I froze like someone had unplugged me from sound and air. The chef turned his head sharply, eyes wide. The young waiter whispered, horrified, "Did he just—" "Yes," I said calmly. "He did." The crowd kept clapping, oblivious. I smiled, a cold, surgical kind of smile. At least I'm still useful. That line hung in the air like steam. Even the kitchen quieted for a heartbeat, as if the walls understood the joke before the humans did. The chef muttered, "That's messed up." I shrugged. Weddings are never clean. They just look that way in photos. Someone outside shouted speech again. The music lowered. I didn't move. I'd spent 30 years behind curtains and back doors running shows just like this, smoothing chaos, cueing music, hiding disasters. It was almost funny how perfectly choreographed my own erasure was. I reached for my clutch, the mauve satin one with a faint wine stain on the edge, and pulled out my phone. Old habits die hard. I always kept digital copies of contracts, invoices, emergency numbers. Being a planner means your phone holds the pulse of every event. I opened the wedding expense sheet, the same spreadsheet I'd built myself, color-coded, cross-referenced, every cell tidy and totaled. The total amount blinked up at me, $72,490. Every cent withdrawn from my savings. Venue deposit, catering advance, band retainer, even the floral arch Ruby was posing under right now. Scrolling down, I saw notes I'd added weeks ago. Final payment due upon event completion. Refund policy, 48-hour clause. A small bitter laugh escaped my lips. Refund policy. I'd written that to protect the bride, never thinking I'd need it for myself. My eyes moved over each line like I was reading a crime scene report, and in a way, I was the scene of my own generosity, looted and weaponized. When I reached the catering staff section, I paused. The MC's mistake replayed in my head, our catering assistant Linda. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was the first honest line of the night. I enlarged the total one more time, $72.490. It used to represent love, sacrifice, pride. Now it was leverage. My fingers stopped trembling. My back straightened. I looked up at the kitchen clock, 8:46 p.m. Outside, the band struck up another waltz. Laughter rippled through the hall, and Ruby's voice called out for another toast. The young waiter reappeared, still looking guilty on behalf of the world. "Mrs. Carmichael, I can go tell them to fix the name." "It's not right," I held up a hand. "Don't. Let them have their moment. But I've handled worse. Trust me. I once had a bride call her groom by the wrong name mid-vow. This barely qualifies as rude. He didn't smile this time. He just nodded and went back to stacking plates. The chef slid a tray of roasted vegetables into the oven, then said quietly, "You're taking this real calm, ma'am." "I've spent decades calming other people's chaos," I said. "Turns out it's good training for family." He grinned sadly. "You sure you're okay?" "Better than okay." I turned my phone screen toward him, showing the spreadsheet total glowing in pale blue. "That's a lot of zeros," he said. "Yes, and every one of them has a string attached." He blinked. I mean tonight they toasted their success," I said softly. "Tomorrow they'll read the fine print." The oven dinged, a bright metallic sound too cheerful for the moment. I stood smoothing the wrinkles out of my chiffon. It still smelled faintly of garlic and heat, but I didn't care anymore. Somewhere between humiliation and exhaustion, something sharper had taken root: clarity. I walked to the kitchen door and peeked through the narrow window. Leo was laughing his arm around Ruby. The two of them glowed under the golden light framed by roses and illusions. Her mother hovered near the DJ, telling him to make it livelier. The MC strutted across the floor, smiling wide, the same mouth that had just turned me into staff. I studied their faces carefully. Every wedding planner knows the moment you stop reacting, you start observing. And once you start observing, you start strategizing. Through the hum of the music, I whispered to myself, "You think this is your night, Ruby. You have no idea who actually runs the show." My reflection stared back at me in the glass eyes, colder, clearer. Not broken, just recalibrating. I thought about every bride I'd ever saved from disaster. Every father I'd comforted when the cake collapsed. Every mother I'd soothed when her daughter threw a tantrum. I'd been everyone's crisis manager, everyone's invisible fix, and suddenly that didn't feel like weakness. It felt like power, because invisibility, if you know how to use it, can be the perfect disguise. I stepped back from the door, my hand still resting on the frame. The sound of Ruby's laughter spilled through one last time before the door swung shut again. In the darkness of the kitchen, I opened the Notes app and typed 6 words. "Tomorrow morning, call the venue manager." Then for the first time that night, I smiled. Not the wounded smile, not the practiced one. A real, private smile. The kind that says, "Game on." The music rose like a living thing, bass trembling through the walls, laughter spilling into the alley behind the reception hall. Someone shouted for another toast. The lights from the ballroom flickered across the glass door, gold and soft like everything good I was no longer part of. I slipped outside. The night air hit me sharp and cool, the smell of overwatered roses mixed with cigarette smoke from a server sneaking a break. Out here, the world felt wider, cleaner, real. The muffled beat of the wedding playlist pulsed through the wall behind me, "Can't Help Falling in Love." How poetic. The kind of song people cry to when they still believe love is owed, not earned. I took my phone from my clutch. The satin fabric brushed against my palm, cool and steady. No shaking this time, just calculation. 3 numbers, 3 vendors, 3 levers in the machine I had built. I took a slow breath, feeling the hum of the air conditioning vent above me. My reflection looked back in the dark glass eyes, steady mouth calm. The invisible mother had gone. The planner had returned. The phone glowed in my hand. Time 9:27 p.m. Call 1. I scrolled to the first contact, the Velvet Strings Band. The contract note flashed at the top of the screen, balance due upon completion. Perfect. The phone rang twice before a cheerful voice answered, muffled by music. "Hey, Linda. Everything going smooth. We're about to start the last set." I smiled faintly. "Not necessary. You can pack up after this song." A pause. "Wait, what? Contract clause B?" I said, voice flat professional. "Performance hours subject to client discretion. That discretion is now exercised." "Linda, that's invoice me for the time you've played." I cut in tone crisp. "Do not charge for the second set. Thank you for your service." I ended the call before the confusion turned into protest. Behind the wall, the strings reached their climax, one final high note stretching into silence. Call 2. I found Fountain Mixology colors in my contacts. The manager, Wes, answered, immediately too chipper for a man paid to pour oblivion. "Mrs. Carmichael, you want another restock? We're running low on champagne, but I can cancel the open bar," I said. The line went quiet. "I'm sorry, cancel it," I repeated. "No more service after 10. Pull the bottles, close the tab, no additional charges. But ma'am, the bride is not the client," I said. My voice sliced clean through the night. "The contract is under my name. The payments, too. I'm ending it. Tonight." He hesitated. "Do you want me to make an announcement?" "No," I said. "Let the silence announce it." Another pause. Then a quiet understood. When I hung up, I could already imagine the scene guests wandering to the bar, finding only melting ice and empty counters, the murmur of confusion spreading like spilled wine. The band had faded, now replaced by the tinny echo of the DJ switching tracks. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else shouted for more champagne. They'd learn soon enough. Call 3. I opened my email contacts, found Maribel's floral design. I didn't need to call. I knew her voicemail tone by heart, but hearing her voice would make it feel real. She answered on the second ring, soft and sleepy. "Linda, everything okay? We're prepping tomorrow's brunch arrangements. Cancel the delivery," I said. A pause. "Oh, did something happen?" "Yes," I said. The event concluded early. The brunch she asked, confused. "But no need for flowers," I continued. "Charge me the penalty if you must, but don't send a single petal." There was gentle sadness in her voice. "Understood. I'll update the invoice." "Thank you, Maribel," I said, quieter now. "You've always been wonderful." She hesitated. "You too, Linda." Click. The call ended. 3 calls, 3 cancellations, 3 quiet detonations in a kingdom that never saw the queen coming. I slipped the phone back into my clutch and looked toward the ballroom windows. From this distance, everything looked perfect, glowing faces, golden light, the illusion of joy. But I knew better. I had choreographed enough weddings to recognize the moment right before things fell apart, the tiny flicker in the rhythm, the half second of wrong timing before chaos bloomed, and I had just planted it. I stood by the garden fence listening. The first shift came like a ripple. The music cut abruptly, no graceful fade, no announcement, just silence, followed by the restless murmur of a confused crowd. Then faintly, a voice near the bar. "Hey, are we out of wine?" Another voice. The bartender said they're closing early. The collective gasp that followed was better than applause. I leaned back against the railing eyes on the sky. A plane blinked across the dark far above the string lights. Somewhere life went on. A gust of wind carried laughter, still strong, still oblivious. But underneath it now was a different note tension, the kind that builds before realization. The chef pushed open the back door, wiping his hands. "You okay out here? Never better." He frowned. "They're saying something's wrong with the bar. Did you—" "Yes," I said simply. His eyebrows shot up. "You canceled it, and the band. And the flowers." He let out a low whistle. "You're not playing around." I gave a small smile. "I never play. I plan." We stood there for a moment, both listening to the muffled noise inside, raised voices, footsteps, the hollow echo of a microphone, feedback squeal. Sounds like the party's changing tone, he said. Every story has its turning point, I replied. They just don't know they're in it yet. He chuckled softly. You're scary, Mrs. Carmichael. Only to people who forget who signs the checks. He grinned and went back inside, shaking his head. I stayed. The lights shimmered through the window, fractured by the glass, distorted into streaks of gold and red. Beautiful, really, how chaos can still look elegant from far away. In another life, I would have walked back in there, smiled for the cameras, pretended everything was fine. But that woman was gone. She'd paid her dues and her invoices. Now it was time to collect what was hers, not money, not apology, but silence. The song inside had ended. No new one started. Instead, there was the faint buzz of confusion, the sound of people realizing the world didn't revolve around them for once. I reached for a half-empty champagne flute left on the outdoor table, not mine, but close enough. The bubbles were flat, the glass smudged. I lifted it anyway, watching the reflection of lights ripple across the surface. They toasted without me, I said softly. I raised the glass toward the glowing windows, not in bitterness, but in ceremony. Here's to silence, I whispered, and to finally being heard. Then I drank. The champagne was warm, slightly bitter. Perfect. The hotel room was too quiet. That kind of silence that feels padded, like every sound gets swallowed before it reaches the walls. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my mauve chiffon dress, the fabric stiff with sweat and kitchen air. My shoes were off toes, swollen and raw, leaving small red indentations where the straps had dug in. I should have showered, or slept, or cried. Instead, I reached for my laptop. The glow of the screen filled the room, soft blue against beige wallpaper. Familiar, safe. My comfort zone had never been people, it was numbers, lists, receipts. Numbers don't lie. They just wait for you to see what's missing. The file name stared at me. Ruby and Leo, wedding budget final.xlsx. I opened it. The spreadsheet unfolded like a confession. Each row, each color-coded cell was my handwriting in pixels. Venue deposit, $12,000. Catering, $18,400. Band, $6,700. Florals, $9,200. Dress alterations, $150. It was my life's precision condensed into columns. I'd built hundreds of wedding budgets over 30 years. None had ever been this personal or this painful. I scrolled to the bottom to the notes section, the one I used to track every adjustment. 7:02, Ruby requested upgraded linens. Approved. 7:16, added signature cocktail. Lavender bliss. Over budget, but agreed. 8:03, photographer's add-on package. 12-hour coverage. Paid in full. 8:18, rehearsal dinner. Head count increased. 6274. Adjusted. Each note was a little piece of permission, each approval a cut. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, then I saw it 2 new rows I hadn't added. The timestamps were from last week. 9:09, bar tasting event. $820 card L. Carmichael 910, bridal spa day, $540 card L. Carmichael. I blinked. My initials, my card. But I hadn't authorized either. I checked my email for the receipts, none. Then I logged into my bank portal, heart rate rising. There they were, both transactions, and one more I hadn't seen before 9:08. Pre-wedding crawl, $1.312. The Velvet Vine Bar downtown. I clicked for details. The description said group tab, 9 guests, 9. I sat back the breath, leaving my chest slowly. 9 people celebrating my expense account. The next thing I opened was Venmo. Not because I expected to find anything, but because the universe has a sense of humor. And there it was, a public transaction between Ruby and one of her bridesmaids, a bubbly girl I'd seen snapping selfies by the floral arch. His mom's paying. Let's go big wedding vibes. For a moment, the screen blurred. I wasn't sure if it was my eyes or the tears. But no, not tears, just heat. Controlled, precise heat. I leaned back the bed, creaking softly beneath me, and stared at the ceiling. The hotel's air conditioner hummed steady and indifferent. They had used my name, my work, my trust as a blank check. I imagined Ruby swiping my card at the spa counter, her fingers tapping the PIN code Leo must have given her. Maybe she laughed. Maybe she even said, "Don't worry, it's covered." Covered by me. The thought should have broken me. Instead, it sharpened something. I went back to the spreadsheet and opened the totals tab. The final sum blinked on the screen, 74,562. I stared at the number. Then my fingers began to type. Adjustment $74,562, 0 one keystroke, delete. I didn't save it, I didn't need to. The file had already done its job, it had told me the truth. On the nightstand, my phone buzzed again, text after text, from Leo, from Ruby, from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't check them. Instead, I clicked open another file, one most brides never knew existed, contractmaster.docs, my safety net. The one I'd written myself years ago after a client ran off mid-deposit. I scrolled to the clause near the bottom. In the event of payment disputes or cancellations initiated by the client, the undersigned retains full authority to rescind vendor contracts without refund liability. I read the line twice. Then I whispered it out loud. Without refund liability. It was like tasting a forgotten language. My language. For the first time that night, I smiled. Not the tight, polite smile I'd worn all evening, the real one. The one that came with understanding. They thought they were clever, spending my money, erasing my seat, turning me into the catering assistant. But they forgot one thing. I wrote the rules they were breaking. I stared at the Venmo note again, the emojis mocking me. It almost made me laugh. The arrogance was so casual, so modern, so public. They didn't even try to hide it. I could practically hear Ruby's voice in my head. "It's just money, Linda. Don't be dramatic." But this wasn't about money. It never was. It was about what money meant: respect, acknowledgement, boundaries. I glanced at the mirror across the room. My reflection looked back at me. Mascara, smudged hair, undone eyes, clear. The old version of me would have cried. This one just calculated. My laptop screen dimmed slightly and the reflection of my face hovered above the spreadsheet too. Linda's one tired one awake. I closed the file, but before shutting it down, I opened a new note and typed slowly, deliberately. They thought I was funding their fairy tale. Turns out I was writing their ending. The words looked right, clean, balanced. I stared at them for a while, the glow of justice wrapped in font size 14, and saved the note under a new title blueprint. Because that's what it was. Not revenge, not rage. A plan, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that whispers, the kind that unfolds one document, one email, one bank call at a time. I shut the laptop, the soft click sounding final, almost ceremonial. Then I reached for the hotel remote and turned off the lamp. The room went dark except for the faint red digits of the clock, glowing 2:17 a.m. Outside, the city kept humming cars' air vents, life continuing like nothing had shifted. But inside me, something had. No heartbreak, no hysteria, just clarity. They had written me out of their story. Now I was the editor, and tomorrow they'd learn what it means when the woman behind the spreadsheet stops funding the fantasy. Morning crept in like a whisper, pale light spilling across the beige curtains of my living room, brushing against picture frames that hadn't moved in years. I had driven home before dawn, the highway empty except for trucks and tired birds. The chiffon dress hung in the back seat like a ghost of someone I used to be. By the time I parked in the driveway, I wasn't angry anymore, just quiet. The house smelled faintly of old wood and lavender detergent. Familiar, safe, maybe even forgiving. I left my purse on the kitchen counter, turned on the coffee maker, and stood there as it gurgled to life. Steam rose in soft white curls. The sound was comforting, like a heartbeat that never judged. I hadn't planned on going through drawers that morning. I just wanted sugar for the coffee. But when I pulled open the side cabinet, a small red envelope slid forward, catching on the edge and falling onto the floor. It was old, the kind of red that had faded into rust, the flap sealed but brittle, like it had been waiting for the right morning to be found. My name was written in ink gone soft with time, Linda. I stared at it for a long moment. There are things in life you think you've already faced death, betrayal, distance, until a single object reminds you that grief has layers. I sat down at the kitchen table, the envelope in my hands. The early sunlight broke through the blinds, slicing across the wood in stripes of gold. My husband's handwriting. Tom Carmichael, U.S. Army, the man who used to iron his shirts twice, whistle Sinatra in the shower, and never once left a drawer open. He'd been gone 8 years. Heart attack. Quick. The kind of ending he would have approved of, no fuss, no bills left unpaid. I ran my thumb along the seal. Then I opened it. The paper was thin, fragile. His handwriting leaned slightly to the right, confident even in ink that had started to fade. Linda. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say what I should have years ago. Leo isn't your blood. I stopped. My pulse didn't spike. My breath didn't hitch. It was as if my body had already known. I read on. He's the child of a woman I knew before you and I met. She wasn't ready. I thought I could fix things by giving him a life our life. You deserved the truth, but I kept it from you because you were already the best mother he could have. You raised him, Linda. You made him yours. Blood never could. The words blurred for a second, not from tears, but from something deeper recognition. Tom had always been quiet when Leo was little. He loved the boy, yes, but there was a distance, a watchfulness. I'd filled in the gaps thinking it was just the way men love differently. Now it made sense. He'd brought home a baby that wasn't mine, and somehow over the years that child had become my entire life. I leaned back in the chair. The sunlight shifted landing square on the letter. Dust floated through the beam, slow and deliberate. Well, I said softly, figures. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I planned every wedding, every detail, every disaster. But not my own life. The line made me laugh, a short, tired sound that echoed through the quiet kitchen. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's dog barked. A car door slammed. The world was still turning. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the red envelope. For a moment, I held it against my chest, feeling the faint rustle of paper against skin, not as a wound, but as a weight finally named. He hadn't betrayed me, not really. He'd chosen me. And somehow that realization hurt and healed all at once. The coffee machine beeped. I poured a cup, black, no sugar. The bitterness suited the morning. Steam rose again, curling around the rim of the cup, catching in the light. I stood by the window and watched the sun climb higher, the pale orange glow spreading over the quiet street. Across the road, Mrs. Henson was watering her garden still in her robe, humming something off-key. 2 kids biked past, their laughter echoing down the block. Life. Messy. Unapologetic. Relentless. I sipped my coffee and looked back at the red envelope on the table. It wasn't a curse. It was context. Leo wasn't my blood, but every scraped knee, every parent-teacher conference, every night shift at the hospital to pay for his braces, that was me. My sweat, my patience, my love. I'd built him from discipline and lullabies. I thought of the wedding again. Ruby's glittering smile, Leo's laugh that didn't sound like his anymore, the way the chandelier light had caught the tears of people who'd never lost a night's sleep over him. Not my blood, but my making. And maybe that's what made it all sting so much. The letter fluttered slightly in the breeze from the vent. I reached out and flattened it again, smoothing the crease with my palm. "Tom," I murmured, "you always did leave the hard stuff for me to clean up." A small smile tugged at my mouth. It wasn't anger, it was something gentler, a kind of exasperated affection that only comes from decades of knowing someone down to their bones. I took another sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest. The light shifted again, flooding the kitchen in full daylight now. It reflected off the counter, glinting against the glass jar where I kept my pens and old receipts. Everything suddenly looked sharper, edges, defined colors, honest. I thought of the spreadsheet again. The zeros, the balance, the false smiles. It was all so perfectly symmetrical, life taking what it wanted, leaving what it must. Maybe the letter wasn't a betrayal. Maybe it was a correction. The truth late but exact, like a final invoice arriving just when you'd forgotten you still owed something. I placed the envelope inside the drawer again, right on top of a stack of blank paper. It didn't belong buried. It belonged known. Then I rinsed my cup, wiped the counter, and sat down with my notebook. There were new calculations to make, not of money, but of meaning. For the first time in years, I wasn't planning for someone else's happiness. I was planning mine. Through the window, the morning light caught the rim of the coffee mug. The world outside sparkled with the kind of ordinary beauty you only see when you stop chasing the extraordinary. I breathed in slowly and whispered almost to myself, not my blood, but my life. And somewhere deep down, beneath all the exhaustion, a quiet certainty began to take root, the kind that doesn't come from spreadsheets or contracts or even justice, the kind that comes from finally knowing who you are. There's a certain kind of silence that comes after clarity, not heavy, not empty, just spacious. Like the world exhaled and finally made room for you. That's what my house felt like that morning. Spacious. The letter from Tom sat quietly in its red envelope on the kitchen table, the coffee mug beside it, half empty, cooling in peace. I hadn't cried. I hadn't broken. I'd simply decided something. If I could plan a 6-figure wedding for people who treated me like an unpaid intern, I could plan one evening for myself. Not revenge, not pity. An event. Operation Me. I said it out loud just to test how it sounded. It felt ridiculous and perfect. I found my old clipboard in the pantry right next to the emergency candles and my last jar of raspberry jam. Still had the same gold clip I used for every wedding, slightly dented at the corner. I wiped off the dust, grabbed a pen, and started the list. Operation Me event plan date. TBD, or maybe tonight, why wait? Location backyard. Unruly underlit, but mine. Guest list. Claire from the corner bakery knows everyone's order and never judges carb intake. Mr. Henderson across the street once shoveled my driveway without asking. Diane, my old co-worker who sends Christmas cards in July. The male woman Nora we trauma bonded over broken packages. And obviously the cat who refuses to acknowledge my existence. I stared at the list and laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that doesn't apologize. There it was, my guest list. Not a single influencer, no signature cocktails, no overpriced photographer. Just people who'd seen me as Linda, not a wallet, not a seat filler. Next line, to-do list. 1. Buy fairy lights. Or find the tangled ones in the shed and pretend it's aesthetic. 2. Wine, not champagne. I've earned fermented calm, not bubbly chaos. 3. Real food, something I actually like. Maybe pasta. 4. Music, nothing about love. Just swing, jazz, something alive. 5. Practice saying no repeatedly until it sounds natural. That last one needed its own section. I stood up, marched to the hallway mirror, and looked at the woman staring back. Hair a little wild robe, half-buttoned eyes sharper than they'd been in years. All right, I said to my reflection. Rehearsal time. I straightened my back, cleared my throat. No, too polite. No, too apologetic. I adjusted my tone, channeling every wedding planner who'd ever dealt with a demanding bride. No, I don't think that's necessary. Better. Then I grinned. No, because I said so. Perfect. I held the stare for a few seconds longer, then saluted my reflection with my coffee mug. Approved. Back in the kitchen, I found the old radio I'd kept since the 90s, the one with the worn-out buttons and a faint smell of vanilla candles. It took a few tries, but finally a familiar voice filled the room. Fly me to the moon. Let me play among the stars. Sinatra. Of course. Tom's favorite. I smiled. All right, old man. You can have this one. The day unfolded like a slow montage from a movie no one's filming. I went to the grocery store, humming under my breath, picking out exactly what I wanted. Tomatoes that smelled like sunshine, fresh basil, a bottle of Merlot with a label I didn't even pretend to understand. The cashier, a young girl with glitter eyeliner and pink nails, smiled at me. Big dinner party. Something like that, I said. Guest of honor me. She laughed, handed me the receipt, and said, You deserve it. I almost said thank you, but it came out as a nod. My throat was busy holding back something else, not tears, not pride, just feeling. By afternoon, I was out in the backyard, sleeves, rolled up hair, pinned in a messy bun, staring at a ball of fairy lights that looked like an electrical accident. The sky was turning soft blue. Somewhere, a sprinkler clicked rhythmically, keeping time like a metronome for my chaos. "All right, Operation Me," I muttered. "Let's do this." I started untangling. The first few minutes were fine. Then came the knots. Eternal, malicious knots. At one point, I tripped over the extension cord and fell into the flower bed. The cat watched from the porch tail, flicking like a judge. "Don't look at me like that," I told him. "You've never organized anything." By the time I managed to get the lights strung across the fence, the sun had dipped below the horizon. The bulbs flickered once, twice, then came alive, warm yellow against the growing dark. I stepped back, hands on hips, dirt on my knees, and laughed. It wasn't perfect. Some strings sagged. One bulb was out, but it was beautifully imperfect, like freedom itself, slightly crooked, glowing anyway. I went inside, poured myself a glass of Merlot, and carried it out to the backyard. The night air was cool, soft. The lights shimmered faintly against the trees, and Sinatra's voice drifted through the open kitchen window. In other words, please be true. I swayed a little barefoot on the grass wine in hand, the hum of the song mixing with the buzz of summer insects. Somewhere between the verse and the chorus, I started to laugh, deep, unstoppable laughter that cracked through years of practiced restraint. It wasn't hysteria, it was release. For the first time in years, I wasn't managing anyone's happiness. I wasn't being polite or invisible or useful. I was just here. The cat jumped down from the porch and rubbed against my leg, purring like he'd just discovered I was human after all. I looked up at the string lights. They flickered faintly, uneven but steady. "Not bad, Linda," I whispered. "Not bad at all." Then with mock ceremony, I lifted my glass toward the night sky. "To the most important event I've ever planned," I said softly, "the rehearsal of freedom." The stars above shimmered back uninvited guests, but welcome anyway. I took a sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread slow and honest through my chest, and then, without meaning to, I started humming along. Sinatra sang, "Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore." And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I did. I sang. Not for anyone, not to prove anything, just because I finally could. It was exactly noon when the knock came. Not a timid tap, not an impatient pounding, just 3 even knocks. The kind of rhythm a man rehearses when he doesn't know what's waiting on the other side. I didn't move right away. The clock above the mantel ticked once, twice. The cat lifted his head from the armchair and stared at the door like he already knew who it was. I'd been expecting this visit, not hoping for it, not dreading it, just expecting, like a final appointment on a long overdue calendar. When I opened the door, Leo stood there. He looked older than a week ago. Not physically the same crisp shirt, the same clean shave, but something behind the eyes had shifted. A man who'd finally seen himself in a mirror and didn't like what he found. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice low. "Leo." For a second, neither of us moved. The sunlight hit his face at an angle that made him look 12 again. The boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the park roots and all saying they'd grow better that way. But that boy had grown into a man who'd let his wife seat me by the kitchen. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. "You already are." He followed me into the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd found the red envelope, where the letter had changed everything and yet explained everything too. On the table, I had set 2 objects side by side, a small wooden box filled with printed invoices and receipts and the red envelope. I'd been waiting to show them both. He looked at them confused at first, then wary. "What's all this?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, let's review." He hesitated, then obeyed. Old habits die slow. I opened the box and slid the top sheet across the table. "This," I said evenly, "is every expense for your wedding. itemized, cross-checked, paid in full. He glanced down, his jaw tightened. You didn't have to. I did, I cut in gently, because no one else was going to. You were busy making speeches, and Ruby was busy making centerpieces that looked like tax deductions. His lips parted, but no words came out. I slid another paper forward, the spa receipt, then the tasting bar invoice, then the Venmo screenshot, each one laid down like evidence in a quiet trial. His shoulders slumped. Mom, I don't. My voice was calm, but it carried weight. Don't start with, it wasn't her idea. You were there. You watched. You let it happen. He rubbed his temples, exhaling hard. I didn't think. No, I said softly. You didn't. For a moment, the room filled with silence, the kind that hums just before a confession. Then slowly, I picked up the red envelope and placed it beside the papers. This, I said, was your father's. He frowned. Dad read it. He unfolded the letter, and as his eyes scanned the words, the air between us seemed to shift the weight of truth, landing where it always should have. When he finished, he looked up, color drained from his face. You knew I found it last week. He swallowed. So I'm not. No, I said quietly. Not by blood. The silence stretched. His throat worked as if words were trying to climb out but couldn't. Finally, he whispered, I don't know what to say. I leaned back in my chair, studying him the way I used to study wedding blueprints, all design, no structure. I'm not angry, you're not my blood, I said. I'm angry you let her seat me by the kitchen. He looked up, startled. That's what hurt? I continued. Not the DNA, not the money. The moment you decided someone else's comfort was worth more than my dignity. His eyes glistened, but I kept my voice steady. You watched me fade into the wallpaper. You let them call me the catering assistant. And you said nothing. He started to speak, but I lifted a hand. Leo, I didn't raise you to be cruel, but I did raise you to know better. You can't fix disrespect with flowers or phone calls. Respect isn't an apology. It's an action. He bowed his head. I know. Do you? I asked. Because apologies don't pay respect or refunds. That one landed. I saw it in the way his mouth pressed shut, in the way his fingers curled around the edge of the table. He nodded slowly. You're right. I usually am. For a fleeting second, something almost like a smile crossed his face, then faded. He looked at the receipts again, then at me. I'll pay you back. I shook my head. That's not the point. Money isn't what I lost. It's what you did when you let someone else decide where I belonged. He looked up, eyes glassy. I'm sorry. I know. My voice softened. But that's for you, not for me. He sat there, hands clasped, staring at the invoices like they were confession papers. The sunlight from the window caught the edge of the red envelope, making it glow faintly. Dad loved you, he said quietly. I know he did. And you still love me? I met his gaze. I always will. But love isn't the same as access. He blinked. What do you mean? I mean you're welcome to visit, to talk, to rebuild. But the days of assuming I'll pay for your mistakes or your parties are over. He nodded slowly, like each word had weight. I stood up and walked to the counter, poured him a glass of water, set it down. He looked at it, then at me, and smiled faintly. Still taking care of me. Old habits, I said, but they can be unlearned. We sat there for another minute, the clock ticking between us. Then he rose, pocketed the letter, hesitated. Can I come by again? Depends, I said. Will you seat me by the kitchen? He laughed softly, a real one, nervous and ashamed. No, Mom. You'll always have the best seat. Good. He lingered for a second, then walked to the door. As he stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit his shoulders, and for a moment, he looked like that boy again, the one with wildflowers and dirt on his knees. He turned back. You really canceled everything. The band, the bar, and the vows, I said. Every last one. He shook his head, half smiling. Of course you did. The door closed gently behind him. I stood there for a while, letting the quiet settle again, the same quiet that had once felt empty, but now felt earned. On the table, the invoices sat neatly stacked, the red envelope resting on top. Proof of everything built, lost, and reclaimed. I picked up my coffee mug and whispered into the empty room. He'll learn, eventually. Then I smiled, not bitter, not proud, just peaceful, and added, after all, I taught him how. I used to think the saddest sound in the world was an empty dining room. Now I know better. It's only sad if you keep waiting for the wrong people to fill it. The table tonight was full, and not with obligation. The theme was simple, maybe even silly, blue and sunflower table dinner. My first event planned for Joy Not Duty. 6 guests, 1 host, no clients. The tablecloth was deep, navy, soft linen I'd ironed that morning until it looked like calm water. Down the center ran a row of mason jars stuffed with bright sunflowers, their petals reaching toward the string lights overhead. The smell of roasted garlic and butter hung in the air. Sinatra played again, but softly this time. Background, not spotlight. When the doorbell rang, I didn't brace myself. I smiled. Linda. This looks divine, Claire said as she stepped inside, balancing a peach pie and her laughter. Don't start flattering me until you've tried the chicken, I said. It's experimental. Behind her came Mr. Henderson carrying a bottle of Chardonnay like it was diplomatic cargo. Then Nora, the mail woman still in her uniform but radiant. Diane followed wearing too much perfume and the world's most enthusiastic grin. The last 2 were neighbors from down the block, Hank and Elsie, who'd brought folding chairs just in case. 6 people who had never asked for anything from me but company. I poured the wine, handed out plates, and let the noise bloom. The conversation started politely, as dinners do, compliments, weather, grocery prices. But somewhere between the second glass and the salad course, the walls of politeness cracked, as they always should. Hank, bless his heart, leaned back in his chair and announced, So this morning, I locked myself out of the house in my underwear. The room went silent for half a beat, then exploded. Claire nearly choked on her wine. Nora slapped the table. Even the cat perched on the windowsill seemed mildly entertained. Hank held up a hand like a stand-up comedian. Picture this 8 a.m. trash day. I'm in my boxers holding 1 sock thinking I can make it to the bin and back. Then click. Door shuts, wife gone, neighbor jogging by. I wave. She waves back, with pity. Diane was crying from laughter. What did you do? Climbed through the dog door, he said proudly. Almost broke a rib. But hey, breakfast was warm when I got back. I laughed so hard my sides ached. For a moment, I just sat there letting the sound wash over me, laughter that didn't sting conversation, that didn't circle back to guilt or apologies. Real noise, real people. The fairy lights above flickered gently. Their glow was gold and soft, the exact opposite of the cold chandeliers from that wedding night. I looked around the table, the mismatched plates, the napkins folded unevenly, the wine stain near Claire's elbow, and thought, this is what beauty looks like when it isn't pretending. Diane leaned over, her cheeks flushed. Linda, darling, you could open your own supper club. Forget weddings, host dinners for the living. I smiled. That's the only kind I plan to host now. As I went to refill glasses, Claire caught my wrist. Sit down. Tonight you're not the planner. You're the guest of honor. I hesitated, then obeyed. The chair at the head of the table creaked a little as I sat. Funny how unfamiliar it felt to take up space. Claire stood and raised her glass. The chatter dimmed, replaced by that soft hush that means something true is about to be said. To Linda, she began, her voice clear but warm. Proof that it's never too late to host your own life. The others murmured their agreement, glasses lifted, lights reflecting in every rim. I felt the corners of my mouth pull into a smile, not the practiced kind, not the polite one, the real thing. The kind that starts deep inside and reaches the eyes before the lips. As we clinked glasses, the gold reflections from the fairy lights shimmered across the table, bouncing from glass to glass like tiny suns. It reminded me of the chandeliers at the wedding, the same golden hue. But tonight, it wasn't cold or distant. Tonight, it belonged here. To me. I glanced up. The light flickered against the blue tablecloth, against the petals of sunflowers that leaned outward, open, alive. Claire caught me staring and grinned. "You're thinking about something poetic, aren't you?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm just realizing that light only matters when you decide where to hang it." "Cheers to that," she said. Dinner went on plates. Emptied stories multiplied, and by the time dessert arrived, the air was thick with laughter and burnt sugar. At one point, Mr. Henderson stood to help with dishes. I waved him off. "Sit down. I spent 30 years cleaning up other people's messes. Tonight, I'm making a new tradition. We leave the dishes until morning." Rebel Claire teased. "Freedom fighter," I corrected. When everyone finally left full tipsy, still laughing, I stood in the doorway watching the glow of their taillights fade down the street. The house fell quiet again, but this time it was the good kind of quiet, like a song that ends on the right note. I turned back toward the table. The candles had burned low, the air smelled of lemon and wine, and the fairy light still shimmered faintly against the blue. I walked to the head of the table and sat down just for a moment. The empty plates, the half-drunk glasses, the crumbs, all of it was proof that something had lived here tonight. Something honest. I took a deep breath, the faint scent of sunflowers wrapping around me like memory. 8 chapters ago, I'd been seated by the kitchen invisible, muted, forgotten. Now I was here at the head of my own table. No chandeliers, no vows, no apologies, just light laughter and a smile that finally belonged to me. I picked up my own glass, the last one left standing, and whispered to the quiet, to freedom, and to whoever I'm becoming. Then I drank, slowly savoring the taste. The cat jumped onto the table, curling beside the sunflowers. The lights above flickered once more, gold on blue, a mirror image of that long-ago wedding. But this time, I wasn't behind the door. I was in the light. Morning again. The kind that doesn't rush you, soft light slipping between curtains, the air still holding last night's laughter like a lingering perfume. The plates were still on the table from the dinner. A few glasses stood half full, the wine turned deeper, overnight richer somehow. I didn't clear them, not yet. The house felt different, not larger, not smaller, just mine. I moved through it slowly barefoot on the wooden floor, each creak familiar like a song I finally knew by heart. In the kitchen, the coffee pot gleamed in the sunlight, waiting like an old friend who never asked questions. I spooned the grounds, poured the water, and pressed brew. The smell rose instantly deep, grounding honest. Steam curled through the air. I caught my reflection in the microwave door, hair slightly, wild smile unguarded. A woman no longer planning for other people's celebrations, but living inside her own. The red envelope still sat on the counter, right beside a small vase of wilting sunflowers from last night's table. I didn't move it. Some things deserve to stay visible even when they've already done their work. When the coffee was ready, I poured a cup into my favorite mug, the one with a crack running down the handle. Tom's mug. He'd chipped it years ago and insisted on keeping it because every scar has a story. Maybe that's why I'd never thrown it away. The air was crisp when I pushed open the back door. It swung once, twice, that same soft whump sound that had haunted me since the wedding. The sound of separation, of being placed behind the moment. But this morning it didn't sting. The light poured through the opening, bright and clean, spilling across the kitchen floor like liquid gold. Dust motes floated in the beam, slow and graceful like tiny dancers in no hurry to leave. I held the cup with both hands, feeling the warmth spread through my palms. That door had once been a symbol of distance, of humiliation, of a love measured in seating charts and silence. Now it was just a door, and I was the one opening it. I stepped outside. The porch creaked beneath my feet the same way it always had, but everything else felt new. The yard still carried the scent of wine and grilled chicken, faint traces of last night's laughter lingering in the air. The fairy lights were still hanging dim in the daylight, but beautiful anyway. I sat down on the porch step, the mug nestled against my chest. From here I could see the fence with its uneven string of bulbs, the garden stretching beyond sunflowers leaning east as if still chasing the remnants of dawn. It hit me then quietly but deeply. I didn't need anyone to pull out a chair for me. I'd built my own table. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the quarter hour. A car engine started. Life was doing what it always does, continuing. I took a sip of coffee, strong and slightly bitter the way I liked it. And as the steam rose, I heard that voice in my head, steady and sure. Not from the past, not from anyone else. My own voice. At my son's wedding, the bride sat me in the kitchen. But today, I'm the one opening the door. I smiled. Not the defiant kind, not the vengeful one, just peace simple and earned. The wind stirred, making the door swing gently behind me again once, twice. But this time, the sound wasn't a reminder of exclusion. It was rhythm like punctuation at the end of a story finally finished. I looked toward the yard and thought of Leo, of the way he'd stood in that doorway a week ago, eyes heavy with guilt and recognition. He would find his way, I knew. Maybe slower than I hoped, but he would. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about not letting the memory dictate the light that entered the room. I leaned back against the step, letting the sun touch my face. The warmth seeped into my skin, steady and healing. Somewhere, a mockingbird sang sharp and bright. The world looked almost cinematic, the kind of shot you'd see before the credits roll, a woman older but not diminished, sitting with her coffee framed by light and silence. In another story, this would be the ending. But in mine, it was a beginning that didn't need permission. I reached for my phone and opened a blank note, typed 3 words, next dinner Sunday. Because healing, like hosting, was better repeated. I closed the phone, took another sip, and whispered softly to no one in particular. Here's to second chances, even the quiet ones. The wind blew again and the kitchen door swung open one last time. The sound filled the air. Whoomp! Whoomp! Not a barrier, not a burden. Just motion. Just life. I turned my face toward the light and let the moment hold still, long enough for gratitude to settle. And as the camera, if there had been one, pulled slowly back from the porch, past the string lights, past the small sunlit yard, the voiceover would come again. Calm and steady, like a closing chapter that knew exactly where it belonged. They once seated me by the kitchen door. But that's all right. Because the view from here, it's better than any ballroom. Fade to sunlight. The wind carried the scent of coffee and sunflowers. The house stood behind me, the door wide open. And for the first time, truly, I didn't feel left behind. I felt home. If you've ever had to open your own door when the world shut one in your face, this story is for you. Tell me where you're listening from, and remember it's never too late to host your own life. Subscribe for more stories like this one, and let's keep the light on.